The galaxy was quiet now. It had been quiet for a very long time. Nearly 40,000 years had passed since the last human ship vanished into the darkness of space. The great alien races had grown comfortable in this silence. They had forgotten what it felt like to fear. Admiral Kethvar floated in his crystal command chair aboard the Zephyrian warship Eternal Light. His body was made of living crystal that pulsed with soft blue energy. Like all Zephyrians, he was beautiful and deadly. His race had ruled the galaxy for 30,000 years, ever since they helped drive the humans away. The bridge around him hummed with quiet efficiency. Zephyrian technology was elegant and powerful. Their ships could cross the galaxy in days. Their weapons could crack planets. Their shields could stop almost anything that existed in the known galaxy anyway. Status report, Kethvar commanded. His voice rang like crystal bells. All sectors peaceful, Admiral, replied his second-in-command. The outer rim patrols report nothing unusual. Trade routes are secure. The younger races continue to obey the Council's laws. Kethvar nodded. This was how things should be. The galaxy was ordered now, civilized. The Galactic Council ruled from Harmony Hub, the massive space station that humans had once called New Geneva. It was better this way. The humans had been wild and unpredictable. They fought too much. They expanded too fast. They asked too many questions. Now Earth was a museum world. The Zephyrians had preserved it perfectly under energy domes. Tourists came to see where the extinct humans had lived. They walked through the frozen cities and marveled at how primitive the technology was, how simple the buildings looked, how small their dreams had been. The guide programs always told the same story. Humans had been aggressive. They had tried to conquer the galaxy. They had destroyed themselves through war and pollution. It was sad, really, but it was also a good lesson for other young races about what happened when you reach too far too fast. Kethvar had heard these stories many times. He believed them because everyone believed them. The Council's historians had studied the human ruins for thousands of years. They had written detailed reports about human society and culture. Everything was documented. Everything was explained. What Kethvar did not know was that most of these reports were lies. Deep in the Council archives, buried under layers of security and forgotten passwords, were the real records of humanity's disappearance. Files that told a different story. Files that explained why human ships had suddenly gathered at the galaxy's edge 40,000 years ago. Files that described the massive exodus beyond the galactic rim. But no one read these files anymore. The beings who had written them were long dead. Their children had been raised on the official story. After 40,000 years, even the lies had become truth in most minds. The real truth was much more frightening. Humans had not destroyed themselves. They had not simply vanished. They had been driven away by the combined fleets of a dozen alien races who feared what humanity might become. The young human civilization had been growing too fast, learning too quickly, adapting too well to challenges. So the aliens had formed a secret alliance. They had blockaded human worlds. They had cut off trade routes. They had made it clear that humanity had two choices: submit to alien rule or leave the galaxy forever. Humanity had chosen to leave. The human exodus had been massive and organized. Millions of ships had gathered resources for the journey. They had packed up entire cities. They had loaded generation ships with everything they would need to survive in the dark between galaxies. And then, in a single coordinated movement, they had left. The galaxy had celebrated. The dangerous humans were gone. Their worlds could be divided up among the victorious races. Their technology could be studied and improved upon. Their history could be rewritten to make the aliens look like heroes instead of conquerors. For 40,000 years, this lie had held. The galaxy had grown rich and comfortable on former human worlds. Great cities had been built where human colonies once stood. Entire civilizations had risen to power using resources stolen from abandoned human territories. But now, in the depths of space, strange things were happening. Deep space monitoring stations were picking up unusual signals. Massive energy readings were appearing at the galaxy's edge. Ships of unknown design were moving in perfect formations through the cosmic dark. The aliens dismissed these readings. They were probably natural phenomena. Maybe cosmic storms or colliding asteroids. Certainly nothing to worry about. After all, nothing dangerous lived beyond the galaxy's edge. Nothing important had ever come from that empty darkness. On his bridge, Admiral Kethvar reviewed the daily reports from the Outer Rim. Everything was normal. Everything was peaceful. The galaxy was exactly as it should be, ordered, predictable, and under control. He did not notice the small notation at the bottom of one report. A minor sensor glitch from monitoring Station 7. Some kind of interference had disrupted their long-range scanners for exactly 17 seconds. The automated systems had logged it as a cosmic ray burst and moved on. If Kethvar had looked more closely, he might have realized that the interference pattern was too organized to be natural. Too precise, too purposeful. It looked almost like a scanner sweep, the kind of deep scan that an advanced civilization might use to map enemy positions. But Kethvar did not look closely. Neither did his officers. Neither did the thousands of other alien commanders who received similar reports over the following days. They were all too comfortable in their certainty that nothing could threaten their perfect galactic order. Far beyond the galaxy's edge, in the cold darkness between star systems, something watched and waited, something that had spent 40,000 years growing stronger, something that remembered every detail of the betrayal that had driven it into exile, something that had learned patience from the endless void, but had never learned to forgive. The galaxy's long peace was about to end. The comfortable lies were about to be exposed. And the beings who had built their civilizations on stolen human worlds were about to discover that their victims had never really left. They had simply gone away to become something much more dangerous. Admiral Kethvar finished reading his reports and prepared to retire to his quarters. Tomorrow would be another quiet day of peaceful patrols. Another day of maintaining the perfect order that his people had worked so hard to create. He had no idea that tomorrow would be the day humanity returned. And when they came back, they would not be the same species that had left 40,000 years ago. They would be something new, something evolved, something that had learned to survive in the darkness between galaxies and had come home to collect the debt that was owed. The galaxy had enjoyed its comfortable illusion of supremacy for nearly 40 millennia. In less than 24 hours, that illusion would be shattered forever, and the beings who had driven humanity into exile would finally understand what they had really accomplished. They had not destroyed their enemy. They had created one. The message arrived at exactly midnight, Galactic Standard Time. Every communication device in the galaxy received it at the same moment. Every screen, every speaker, every neural interface across thousands of worlds suddenly carried the same signal. It began with silence. 10 seconds of perfect quiet that somehow felt heavier than any sound. Then a voice spoke in clear, perfect galactic standard. Humanity remembers. That was all. 3 words, but those words sent shockwaves across the galaxy faster than any weapon ever could. On the bridge of the UES Defiance, Captain Zara Chen stood before the main view screen and smiled. It was not a kind smile. Her eyes glowed with soft blue light from the neural interfaces that connected her mind directly to her ship. Enhanced muscle and bone made her stronger than any baseline human had ever been. Genetic modifications had extended her lifespan to centuries. But despite all these changes, she was still recognizably human. "Status report," she said in a voice that carried the weight of 40,000 years. "All fleet elements have arrived on schedule," replied Ares, her AI companion. The artificial intelligence existed as both a voice in her head and a presence throughout the ship. 37,000 combat vessels in formation, 500 million crew members ready for action, all systems optimal. Through the view screen, Chen could see the vast human fleet spread across space like a dark constellation. Each ship was beautiful in a deadly way. They were sleek and curved, wrapped in energy fields that bent light around them. They looked nothing like the crude human ships that had left the galaxy so long ago. "Begin Phase 1, Chen ordered. Across the galaxy, human ships materialized out of nowhere. They appeared in orbit around major worlds at key trade routes, near important military bases. They came out of something that looked like folded space, reality bending around them as they emerged from whatever impossible method they used to travel. The aliens' first reaction was confusion. These ships did not match any known design. Their energy signatures were completely unfamiliar. Their materials seemed to absorb sensor scans instead of reflecting them. The second reaction was fear. On Zephyr Prime, the crystal being's homeworld, Admiral Kethvar stared at his tactical display in shock. 12 human ships had appeared in his star system without warning. They sat motionless in perfect formation, making no hostile moves but radiating such advanced technology that his sensors could barely understand what they were looking at. "Where did they come from?" he demanded. "Unknown, Admiral," his tactical officer replied. The crystal being's form flickered with stress patterns. They just appeared. No jump signatures, no fold space distortions, no warp trails. One moment space was empty, the next moment they were there. Attempt communication. No response to any frequency, Admiral. They are scanning us, but with technology we cannot identify. Similar scenes played out across the galaxy. The Korvax Hivemind worlds found human ships studying their biomechanical cities with interest. The Nexus Collective's energy beings discovered that their normally invisible forms were being tracked and analyzed by unknown sensors. Every major alien civilization suddenly realized they were being watched by something they did not understand. The Galactic Council called an emergency session. Representatives from every major race gathered at Harmony Hub in a state of panic. The meeting chamber, built in what had once been human architecture, now hosted the beings who had stolen it, discussing the return of its original owners. "They claim to be human," announced the Zephyrian regent, his crystal form pulsing with agitation. "But that is impossible. Humans have been extinct for nearly 40,000 years. The energy signatures are unlike anything in our databases," added the Korvax Queen, speaking with the combined voice of 1 billion drones. "These ships use technology that violates several known laws of physics. The Nexus Prime node, currently inhabiting an energy form that glowed with frustrated light, projected its thoughts directly into the chamber. Whatever these beings are, they have been watching us, studying us, learning about us. This was planned." The truth was more disturbing than they knew. Humanity had not spent 40,000 years hiding in the dark between galaxies. They had spent that time learning from something ancient and powerful. When the human Exodus fleet had traveled beyond the galactic rim, they had expected to find empty space. Instead, they had found the architects. The architects were beings so old that they had watched galaxies form and die. They had transcended physical existence eons ago, becoming something between matter and energy, between thought and reality. Most species that encountered the architects simply went mad from trying to understand them. But humans were different. They adapted. They learned. They proved themselves worthy of the architects' attention. The architects had tested humanity in ways that would have destroyed other races. They had challenged human creativity, human determination, human ability to grow and change. And humanity had passed every test. In return, the architects had shared knowledge. Not just technology, but understanding. Ways to manipulate matter at the quantum level. Methods to fold space like paper. Techniques to merge biological consciousness with artificial intelligence. Secrets that could turn a single ship into a weapon capable of cracking moons. Now, after 40 millennia of guided evolution, humanity had returned. They were no longer the same species that had fled the galaxy. They were something new. Something that combined the best of biological life with the power of advanced technology. They were what every species could become if they had the courage to change and the wisdom to grow. But first, they had debts to collect. Captain Chen walked through the corridors of her ship, her enhanced senses picking up data streams that would have overwhelmed a normal human brain. Every surface around her was alive with information. The ship itself was more like a living organism than a machine. Its systems grown rather than built. Its intelligence distributed throughout its structure. "The aliens are mobilizing their fleets," Ares reported. "Preliminary estimates suggest they will gather approximately 10 million ships within the next 72 hours. Chen's smile grew wider. 10 million ships using 40,000-year-old technology against 37,000 ships that the architects helped design. They still think this is about numbers. Should we attempt diplomatic contact? No, Chen replied. They had 40,000 years to practice diplomacy. They used that time to build monuments to their victory over us instead. Now they get to learn what defeat actually looks like. The human fleet began to move, not toward any specific target, but into formation for something the aliens had never seen before. The ships arranged themselves in complex patterns that seemed almost artistic, their movements precise and coordinated in ways that suggested they were being controlled by a single vast intelligence, which, in a way, they were. Every human ship was connected to every other through quantum communication links. Every captain shared information with every other captain instantly. The entire fleet operated as one massive organism with 37,000 bodies and 500 million minds. The aliens watching from their sensor stations saw this coordination and felt something they had not experienced. In 40,000 years, the knowledge that they were facing something superior to themselves. The galaxy's comfortable certainty was cracking. The beings who had ruled for so long suddenly remembered what it felt like to be afraid. And in the dark of space, humanity prepared to remind them of something even more important, what it felt like to lose. The Battle of Nexus Cluster began at dawn, Galactic Standard Time. It lasted exactly 17 minutes. When it was over, the galaxy's understanding of warfare had changed forever. Fleet Admiral Marcus Kane stood on the command deck of the UES Retribution, watching as 10 million alien ships moved into attack formation. The combined fleet represented every major civilization in the galaxy. Zephyrian crystal dreadnoughts floated alongside Korvax biomechanical swarms. Nexus collective energy vessels pulsed with power next to the metal warships of a dozen smaller races. It was the largest military force ever assembled in galactic history. The aliens were confident that sheer numbers would overwhelm these returning humans, no matter how advanced their technology had become. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Enemy fleet approaching. Optimal engagement range, reported Commander Sarah Park. Her HFY consciousness was linked directly to the ship's tactical systems, allowing her to process information faster than any biological brain could work alone. They are maintaining standard formation patterns from 40,000 years ago. Kane nodded. The aliens had become comfortable in their superiority. They had not needed to innovate or adapt their military tactics because no one had challenged them for millennia. They still fought like they were facing the primitive human ships that had fled the galaxy so long ago. All ships prepare for engagement, Kane broadcast to the human fleet. Remember, we are not here to conquer. We are here to teach. The alien fleet opened fire first. Millions of energy beams and missile swarms crossed the space between the fleets. It was a display of firepower that could have sterilized entire star systems. The light show was visible from planets dozens of light years away. When the barrage reached the human fleet, something impossible happened. The attack simply stopped existing. Energy beams dissolved into nothing. Missiles vanished as if they had never been fired. The entire alien assault disappeared without leaving so much as a scorch mark on human shields. Quantum dispersal fields operating at full efficiency, Park reported calmly. Enemy weapons are being converted to harmless energy and scattered across subspace. The aliens stared at their tactical displays in confusion. According to their sensors, they had just fired enough weapons to destroy a small moon. According to the same sensors, absolutely nothing had happened to their targets. Then the human fleet began to move. What the aliens saw defied everything they understood about physics. Human ships simply stepped sideways out of normal space, reappearing instantly at different locations. They moved through solid matter as if it was not there. They accelerated to impossible speeds without showing any effects of inertia. Phase technology activated, Kane announced. All ships begin demonstration. The UES Prometheus, a sleek destroyer only 200 meters long, materialized directly in the path of the Korvax dreadnought Hive's glory. The alien ship was 3 kilometers of biomechanical horror, home to over 1 million warrior drones. It had enough firepower to level continents and armor thick enough to survive direct hits from stellar-class weapons. The Prometheus fired a single shot. The weapon was not an energy beam or a missile. It was something far more subtle and far more terrible. It was a gravitational pulse that reached inside the dreadnought and simply changed how space worked in that location. The Hive's glory folded in on itself like a piece of paper being crumpled up. 3 kilometers of ship and 1 million living beings compressed to the size of a marble in less than a second. The gravitational forces involved were so intense that they created a brief artificial black hole that consumed the compressed remains before evaporating in a flash of radiation. Across the battlefield, similar demonstrations were taking place. Zephyrian crystal ships, supposedly indestructible, shattered like glass when human quantum resonance weapons found the exact frequency needed to disrupt their molecular bonds. Nexus collective energy beings found themselves trapped in containment fields that existed in 11 dimensions simultaneously, making escape impossible by any known method. The smaller alien races fared no better. Their metal ships simply ceased to exist when human disintegration beams touched them, not destroyed, erased as if they had never been built in the first place. In 17 minutes, the most powerful military force in galactic history was reduced to scattered survivors fleeing in panic. 10 million ships became 10,000, then 1,000, then a few hundred desperate survivors broadcasting surrender signals that no one was listening to. Kane opened a communication channel to every remaining alien vessel and every inhabited world in the galaxy. His image appeared on millions of screens, clearly human but enhanced with neural implants that glowed like small stars. His eyes held the weight of 40,000 years of exile and preparation. "You drove us from our home," he said in a voice that carried across the galaxy. "You stole our worlds. You enslaved our legacy. You rewrote our history to make yourselves heroes and us the villains. You built your civilizations on the graves of our dreams." The camera pulled back to show the battlefield around him. Debris from alien ships drifted in space, but there was surprisingly little of it. Most of the defeated vessels had simply been removed from existence rather than destroyed in conventional terms. "You believed humanity was extinct," Kane continued. "You were wrong. We are not the same species that left this galaxy 40,000 years ago. We are what you forced us to become, something stronger, something wiser, and something that will never again allow itself to be driven away by fear and jealousy. On crystal worlds and hive planets, in energy storms and metal cities, alien beings watched and trembled. They were seeing the end of an age. The comfortable era when they had ruled without challenge was over. Something new was beginning, and they had no idea what role they would play in it. "We did not come back for revenge," Kane said, and some watching aliens felt a moment of hope. Then his expression hardened. "We came back for justice. There is a difference." The transmission ended, leaving the galaxy in stunned silence. In 17 minutes, humanity had proven that 40,000 years in exile had not made them weak. It had made them into something that no other species could match or challenge. But the battle was just the beginning. Now came the more difficult task, deciding what to do with the beings who had driven them away. The galaxy had learned what human technology could do. Soon they would learn what human justice looked like. And for many of the species that had celebrated humanity's exile, that lesson would be far more terrifying than any weapon. The age of alien dominance was over. The age of human justice was about to begin. And in the darkness of space, 37,000 human ships moved toward their former homeworlds to reclaim what had been stolen, and to teach the galaxy what happened when you made enemies of a species capable of learning from gods. The reclamation of human space began 3 days after the Battle of Nexus Cluster. It was not a traditional invasion with armies and occupation forces. Instead, it was something much more systematic and much more terrifying. Justice delivered with the precision of advanced science and the patience of a species that had waited 40,000 years for this moment. Captain Lisa Rodriguez walked through the restored biodomes of Kepler 442b, breathing air that had not existed on this world for 38,000 years. The planet had once been humanity's most successful agricultural colony, feeding dozens of nearby worlds with genetically modified crops that could grow in harsh conditions. When the aliens drove humanity away, the Zephyrians had strip-mined the atmosphere for rare gases, leaving behind a dead rock. Now the world was green again. "Atmospheric composition is optimal," reported Lieutenant Commander Hayes, his cybernetic arm interfacing directly with the planetary environmental network. The terraforming nanites completed their work 6 weeks ahead of schedule. All major ecosystems are stable and self-sustaining. Rodriguez nodded, watching through the dome's transparent walls as Zephyrian prisoners worked to restore the soil they had poisoned. The crystal beings moved slowly and carefully, their normally graceful forms awkward in the environmental suits that protected them from the very atmosphere they had destroyed. It was fitting work for them. Their immortal bodies were perfect for the dangerous task of cleaning up toxic waste. "The local Zephyrian administrator is requesting another audience," Hayes continued. "She wishes to discuss work assignments and compensation." Rodriguez's laugh was sharp and cold. "Compensation? For 38,000 years of theft and destruction? Tell her she can discuss compensation with the ghosts of the humans who died when they poisoned this world." But humanity's justice was not simple revenge. It was something far more sophisticated. The returning humans had learned patience and wisdom during their long exile, and they understood that pure vengeance would make them no better than their enemies. Instead, they had developed a system of consequences that would teach the galaxy's dominant species what their actions had really cost. On the hive world of Korvax Prime, the great collective consciousness that had ruled over billions of drones was fragmenting. Human psychic dampeners, technology learned from the architects, were breaking the neural links that held the hive mind together. For the first time in their species' history, individual Korvax were experiencing personal thoughts and emotions. Queen Zeta 7, who had once commanded the thoughts of a billion beings, now sat alone in her chamber experiencing something she had no words for: loneliness. The constant background hum of shared consciousness was gone, replaced by the terrifying silence of individual existence. "I am alone," she whispered to the human observer who sat across from her. Dr. Michael Chen, no relation to Captain Zara Chen, was a specialist in collective consciousness studies. He had volunteered for this assignment despite knowing how difficult it would be to watch. "Yes," he said gently. "This is what it feels like to be an individual. This is what every being you enslaved experienced when you forced them into your hive mind." Zeta 7's mandibles clicked nervously. How do you survive it? The silence, the separation? You learn," Chen replied. "You discover that individual consciousness is not a weakness to be absorbed. It is a strength to be celebrated. You find connections based on choice rather than force. You build relationships instead of assimilating them." Similar lessons were being taught across the galaxy. The Nexus Collective's energy beings, who had treated biological life as resources to be harvested, found themselves bound into physical forms. They gasped with new lungs, felt pain with new nerve endings, and learned fear through newly formed hearts. The immortal beings who had casually snuffed out millions of biological lives now understood what mortality felt like. But the greatest challenge was Earth itself. Admiral Zara Chen stood in the ruins of New Geneva, humanity's former capital city. The Zephyrians had preserved it under energy domes as part of their museum world, but preservation was not the same as life. The city was a tomb, beautiful and perfect and completely dead. Restoration estimates are complex, Ares reported through their neural link. The Zephyrians maintained the physical structures perfectly, but all biological systems were terminated. "We can rebuild the infrastructure, but recreating the ecosystem will require extensive terraforming." Chen walked through streets that had once bustled with human life. Now they were silent and empty, populated only by holographic displays that told lies about humanity's self-destruction. The lies would need to be corrected, but that was a smaller problem than the deeper damage. "What about the Sol system modifications?" she asked. "Extensive," Ares replied grimly. "They built a Dyson swarm around our sun, harvesting 60% of its energy output for their galactic projects. Jupiter has been converted into a gas mining operation. Mars is now a Zephyrian military base. The asteroid belt has been completely strip-mined." Chen felt rage building in her enhanced nervous system, but she controlled it. Anger would not restore what had been lost. Only careful work and advanced technology could do that. "Begin the restoration process," she ordered. "Remove every piece of alien technology from our star system. If they wanted to mine our sun, they should have asked permission first." The work began immediately. Human ships swarmed through the Sol system like antibodies cleaning an infection. The Dyson swarm was carefully disassembled, its energy collectors converted to raw materials for human projects. The military base on Mars was evacuated and demolished. Jupiter's mining platforms were shut down and removed. Some of the alien workers resisted, claiming legal ownership of their installations. They had spent thousands of years developing these projects, they argued. They had invested enormous resources. Surely humanity could not simply take everything back without compensation. The human response was always the same. "You had 40,000 years to consider the legal implications of stealing our homeworld." The time for legal arguments ended when you decided that might made right. But not all of the reclamation was harsh. Human justice included mercy for those who showed genuine remorse and willingness to change. On worlds where alien colonists had tried to preserve human artifacts or had treated human history with respect, the returning humans were more lenient. These aliens were offered the chance to stay and help with the restoration process. Some accepted. Most fled. The galaxy was learning a hard lesson about the consequences of victory. For 40,000 years, the alien races had grown fat and comfortable on stolen resources. They had built their civilizations on human graves and convinced themselves that they were heroes for doing so. Now they were discovering that every crime had a price, and the bill was finally coming due. Admiral Kane coordinated the overall campaign from his flagship, but his attention was focused on something more important than military operations: the future. Humanity had returned with power beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen, but power without wisdom was just another form of tyranny. Status report from all sectors, he requested. 97% of former human worlds have been secured, reported his tactical officer. Resistance is minimal and decreasing daily. Most alien populations are choosing evacuation over conflict. And the cooperative species? 14 races have formally requested inclusion in the restoration process. They are willing to work under human supervision to help repair the damage they caused. Kane nodded. This was what he had hoped for. Not every species that had participated in humanity's exile was evil. Many had simply followed their leaders or acted out of fear. These beings could be taught. They could learn to be better than they had been, but others would never change. The Zephyrian leadership, the Korvax Queen Mothers, the Nexus Prime Nodes. These beings had made deliberate choices to commit genocide and theft on a galactic scale. They would face the full weight of human justice. The reckoning was far from over. Humanity had returned with overwhelming force, but their real goal was not conquest. It was transformation. They wanted to reshape the galaxy into something better than it had been, something worthy of the sacrifice their ancestors had made when they chose exile over submission. The question was whether the galaxy's other species had the courage to change, or whether they would cling to the old ways until humanity had no choice but to remove them entirely. Time would tell, but one thing was certain: the age of alien dominance was ending, and whatever came next would be built on human terms. The siege of Harmony Hub began on a Tuesday and ended on a Thursday. Not because humanity could not have taken the station faster, but because Admiral Chen wanted every species in the galaxy to watch. She wanted them to understand what was happening. She wanted them to see the end of one age and the beginning of another. The massive space station hung in the void like a metal flower, its arms stretching out in all directions. Once it had been called New Geneva Station, the proud capital of human space. For 38,000 years it had been known as Harmony Hub, the seat of galactic government where alien races gathered to divide up the wealth they had stolen from humanity. Now it was surrounded by human ships that made it look small and primitive by comparison. Inside the station's council chambers, the surviving leaders of the galaxy's major civilizations huddled around a conference table that had been built from human designs. The irony was not lost on anyone present. They were using human architecture to plan their defense against human justice. They have made no demands, reported the Zephyrian regent, his crystal form flickering with stress patterns. They simply await. All our attempts at communication are ignored. Perhaps they are preparing for negotiation, suggested the Korvax Queen Mother, her voice carrying the desperate hope of her fragmented collective. Surely rational beings can reach an understanding. The Nexus Prime Node, trapped in its newly biological body, wheezed as it spoke. What do they want? Resources? Territory? Tribute? We can discuss terms. That was when the main screen activated without warning. Every being in the chamber fell silent as Captain Zara Chen's face appeared before them. She looked human but enhanced. Neural interfaces glowed softly around her temples, and her eyes held depths that spoke of experiences beyond normal understanding. Behind her, visible through the viewports of her flagship, Earth hung like a blue jewel in space. It was alive again, green and blue and white, with city lights beginning to twinkle on the night side. The dead museum world had been transformed back into the cradle of humanity. 40,000 years ago, Chen began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's speakers. You drove us from our home because you feared what we might become. You enslaved our worlds, erased our history, and convinced yourselves that might made right. The alien leaders shifted uncomfortably. Some had been alive when the human exile began. Others had been raised on the official stories about humanity's self-destruction. All of them were learning that their comfortable lies were finally being challenged. Today, Chen continued, we return that lesson to you. We show you what it means to face a superior force with no hope of victory." The Zephyrian regent stepped forward, his crystalline form pulsing with desperate energy. "Surely we can reach an accommodation. The galaxy is vast enough for all of us. We have resources, territory, knowledge we can share. There must be some way to share?" Chen's expression did not change, but something cold flickered in her enhanced eyes. "You had 40,000 years to learn about sharing. Instead, you built an empire on our graves and called it civilization." The chamber fell into heavy silence. Every being present understood that they were facing judgment for crimes that spanned millennia. Crimes that their ancestors had committed but that they had inherited and perpetuated. But then something unexpected happened. Chen leaned back in her command chair and her expression softened slightly. "However," she said, and every alien in the chamber held their breath, "we are not the same species that left this galaxy. We have learned things in the dark between stars. We have studied with teachers older than your civilizations. We have discovered truths about growth, change, and redemption that your empires never understood." Hope flickered in alien hearts. "We offer you something your own governments never provided their victims," Chen continued. "The chance to earn forgiveness. The opportunity to become something better than you have been." She gestured, and the screen split to show images from across the galaxy. Zephyrian prisoners working to restore poisoned atmospheres. Korvax individuals learning to think for themselves. Nexus beings discovering what mortality felt like. Former oppressors becoming students of the species they had wronged. "The new covenant is simple," Chen explained. "All species that participated in humanity's exile will spend the next 1,000 years in service to those they wronged. Not as slaves, but as students. You will learn human values, cooperation over domination, growth over exploitation, unity over hierarchy." The terms appeared on smaller screens throughout the chamber. They were comprehensive and non-negotiable. Alien worlds would be governed by human administrators for the next millennium. Alien children would be educated in human schools. Alien resources would be used for human projects until the debt was paid, but there was also hope in the terms. Species that proved themselves capable of change would gradually regain their autonomy. Those who embraced human values would eventually be welcomed as equals in a new galactic civilization. The covenant was harsh, but it offered a path to redemption that no alien empire had ever provided its victims. "And if we refuse?" asked the Nexus Prime Node. Chen's smile was gentle and terrifying. "Then you will cease to exist. Not as punishment, but as a natural consequence. Evolution never stops. Species that cannot adapt to changing conditions simply disappear." The choice was clear: submit to human justice and work toward redemption, or face extinction at the hands of a species that had learned to reshape reality itself. Most chose submission. Some chose to flee to the galaxy's edges, hoping to find refuge in unexplored regions. A few chose to fight and were quietly removed from existence, their worlds left empty for others to claim. The transformation took time. Decades passed as alien societies slowly adapted to human oversight. Children who had never known the old system grew up learning different values. Former enemies became reluctant allies, then genuine partners in the work of building something better. Captain Chen, now promoted to admiral, stood once again in New Geneva. But this time the city was alive. Humans walked the streets alongside reformed aliens who had earned the right to stay. Children played in parks where multiple species learned together. The air hummed with the sound of a living, growing civilization. "Status report," she requested from Ares. "The transition is proceeding smoothly," the AI replied. 73% of former hostile species have met their rehabilitation benchmarks. Crime rates are at historic lows. Economic productivity is up 400% from pre-exile levels. Most importantly, innovation rates suggest that the combined human-alien civilization will surpass pre-exile human achievements within the next century. Chen nodded. This was what they had really returned for. Not revenge, but growth. Not domination, but partnership. The galaxy that had driven humanity into exile had been stagnant and cruel. The new galaxy they were building together would be dynamic and just. There were still challenges. Some species adapted slowly. Others resented human leadership and plotted resistance. But these problems grew smaller each year as the benefits of the new system became obvious. Trade flowed freely between worlds that had once been enemies. Scientific research advanced at unprecedented rates as different species shared their knowledge. Art and culture flourished as beings learned to appreciate diversity instead of fearing it. The galaxy had learned a hard truth. Evolution never stops, and sometimes the prey returns as the predator. But it had also learned a more important truth. Even predators can choose to build rather than destroy. Admiral Chen often stood at her office window, looking out at the stars that humanity now protected instead of feared. 40,000 years ago, her ancestors had been driven into exile by beings who could not imagine coexistence. Now those same beings' descendants worked alongside humans to build something neither species could have achieved alone. The age of human dominance had not begun with conquest. It had begun with a lesson in consequence that would echo through the stars for eternity. The galaxy had learned what happened when you made enemies of a species capable of learning from gods. But more importantly, it had learned what happened when such a species chose mercy over vengeance, growth over destruction, and hope over despair. The future stretched ahead, bright with possibilities that no single species could have imagined. And at the heart of it all was a simple truth that humanity had learned in the darkness between galaxies. The strongest civilizations were not built on the graves of the weak, but on the partnerships of the willing. The galaxy's long nightmare was over. Its greatest dream was just beginning.